Hi, I'm Anis.
I'm Sasha.
I'm Nur Shahira.
Hello, I'm Fatin.
I'm Ifa.
I'm Amira.
I'm Aisha.
I'm Iza Nazira.
I'm Dian.
And I'm Khalil.
We are going to explain narrative essay.
Okay, I'm Khalil.
I'm Anis.
I'm Shahira.
I'm Dian.
I'm Sasha.
I'm Iza, and we'll do on the plot and vocabulary of narrative essay.
Hi, I'm Iza. I'm going to explain on exposition of narrative writing. Exposition in narrative writing works as a tool to give backstory of the essay. The first step is to decide the point of view of the story. In both samples, the point of view of the essay is first-person point of view. Therefore, the narrator uses pronouns like I to address the story. In the sample essay titled Forgiven, the example is I stood motionless and looked at the solid, dark brown wooden door. The second example is from Student Example 1. I fidgeted nervously, desperately trying to ignore the gloominess of the situation. Next, we have to decide where the characters are. In the sample essay Forgiven, I stood motionless and looked at the solid dark brown wooden door. The house was painted white and black on the wooden beams and window panes. So we know that the narrator is outside of a house and is in front of a door. In student example 1, lying rather uncomfortably on the examination table while facing the painfully bright ceiling lights, we know that the narrator is at the hospital. The last step in writing an exposition in narrative writing is deciding the time. In student example 1, but the events of just a few months prior kept running through my head. The intense pain, my overwhelming fear, and the frantic scrambling of surgeons and nurses in the emergency room. The story starts a few months after the narrator's experience in the emergency room. Another tip in writing an exposition is don't give too much information in the exposition. Add first, explain later.
Hello, my name is Nur Shahira, and I will talk about rising action. So, rising actions is a relevant incident that creates suspense, interest, and tensions in a narrative. In literary works, arising actions include all decisions, characters' flaws, background circumstances that together create turns and twists leading to a climax. Rising action is really the meat of any story in which most of the important actions occurs. Generally speaking, any work of writing that has a plot can be said to have rising action. So the rising actions in Forgiven is when she's starting to give more information about her background and why she's at the positions where she's currently contemplating whether she wants to meet her biological mother who had left her years ago. So the rising actions in student example 1 is when he gradually giving the story behind of his unwell condition. The doctor told him that he had a broken vertebra in his lower back and he probably will not be able to play in the future because of this, even though he is still unsure about it.
Hi, I'm Shasha and I'll be talking about the conflict. To create a story with a climax, it is necessary to begin with a conflict. Without a conflict, there can be no climax. To create a climax, first, think of a problem that a character may face. This is the conflict. Then, think of a way in which that problem may be faced. This is the climax. Climax is the turning point of the story. The action is the most exciting or intense. The characters will face the conflict and start to solve it. For instance, in Forgiven, it was 8 years ago when I started digging files and telling endless documents to find out who my biological parents were. This is the conflict. And even worse, my presence would stop her heart that she would collapse unconsciously, leaving me feeling guilty instead. This is the climax. Another example is, the time had finally come for him to tell me whether or not I could play. This is the conflict. Meanwhile, the climax is, he told me that I would never be able to play football again.
Hello, it's me, Khalil.
Alright, let's now moving on to following action. What is following action in narrative essay? Following action is one of the elements to the plot of the story in the essay. It happens right after the climax of the story and to conclude the narrative that leads to the closure. For example, in Forgiven, the following action in this narrative essay starts after William's mother finally met him after 25 years. To conclude the narrative, it was his mother who was expecting him to come back home and look for her rather than she is the one to meet William at the orphanage house that she left him. As for the text evidence, the narrator said that, well, as if it was my mistake that she had to wait so long. I thought I was supposed to wait for her to find me, or at least she should have gone to Bliss' home to find out. If we look at the student example number 1, the following action in this narrative essay starts when the protagonist was determining to recover from his medical condition, which is broken vertebrae that caused him unable to play football. He keeps on wearing the back brace to support his back and giving false hope that he will be able to recover faster if he wears it more often. However, this determination only leads to another disappointment to the protagonist at the end of the story.
Hi, my name is Tian. Now let's move to resolution. What is resolution in narrative essay? The resolution is the part of the story's plot where the main problem is resolved or worked out. The resolution occurs after the following action and is typically where the story ends. If you already have a plot outline and are in the process of writing your story, you need to consider how to end your story. Without a resolution, your reader will be left hanging and might wonder what the point of the essay is. A well-crafted resolution can deliver the final punch to your paper and will help your reader understand the message you want to convey or the lesson you learned from the experience about which you have written. Your resolution is the final paragraph of your essay, or if your essay is very long, it's the final few paragraphs. Specifically address the resolution of the conflict presented in your essay. Avoid restating your thesis or saying things like "in conclusion" or "I resolved this by." Instead, your resolution should be more subtle and give the reader a sense of relief and clarity. You may also want to address any lingering questions or disagreements the reader might have. For example, from the sample essay, I closed my eyes, afraid that anyone would see me, but I knew she was forgiven.
Hey guys, I'm Anis. Let's learn vocabulary.
Writing a good narrative essay requires you to include interesting information in an engaging way. In order to write an impactful narrative essay, one must not only have rich vocabularies, besides, one must also get used to flowery descriptive words in order to perfectly fit the descriptions. The first example taken from the sample essay is, I fidgeted nervously, student example number 1. The word fidget can be replaced with squirm, tremble, or shiver. Next example is, perceptibly uncomfortable, student example number 1. The other words for perceptibly, which also bring the similar meaning, are discernibly, conspicuously, and overtly. Moving on to the next sample is, it looked huge and expensive from the outside. There are 2 examples, can be taken from this sentence. First, the word huge, can be replaced with enormous, immense or gigantic. Secondly, the other words for expensive, that can be used in the context of this sentence, are extravagant, exorbitant and extortionate. Narrative essay is all about details and clear images of the descriptions. In order to maximize its impact, the essay should use vivid details and dramatic imagery in order to achieve a powerful deliverance to the readers.